And it was so real, I just let the cameras roll. And what you see in a movie is the 5 cameras just rolling.
They put my little bag down and they played this track, and I just remember I melted into the couch and just started crying.
Oh,
tears, tears, tears.
I had to get past so many misconceptions around him to really try to just find who he was in a quiet room, you know?
They were beautiful.
There's no rules on a Baz Lurhmann movie. No rules.
Hi, I am Baz Lurhmann, and welcome to Entertainment Weekly's Around the Table with Elvis.
Wow.
That was great. That was so good.
Well, here's my panel.
The young singer from Memphis, Tennessee. Give him a warm hayride welcome, Mr. Elvis Presley.
Get a haircut, buttercup!
In that moment, I watched that skinny boy transform into a superhero.
My earliest memory of Elvis Presley, it was probably dancing in the kitchen at my grandmother's house. My grandma was a teenager in '56, so she always had blue suede shoes on and stuff. So it's probably blue suede shoes dancing around in the kitchen as a kid. And, she also had his films on all the time, so seeing Blue Hawaii or Jailhouse Rock or something. What about you guys?
I mean, I think he's always been playing through the house ever since I was a tiny child. And
Stole my answer.
well, it's true. I think for a lot of us, that was
Yeah.
also the reality, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, you know, my dad used to sing Can't Help Falling in Love to my mom, and yeah, it's been around for a minute.
Wow.
What about you, Alton?
Studying all the great dance moves like from Michael or like footwork from James Brown, and knowing Elvis's specific move, that one that does the turn, what is it called? Do you know, Austin?
I often call that one the windmill.
The windmill. That's my earliest memory, trying
Wow.
to perfect that.
Wow.
What about you, Tom?
I remember the movies. There was an Elvis movie on TV about every 6 weeks, and he was either playing a singer who also raced cars, or a race car driver who also sang. It seems like there was an awful lot of movies where it was that. But then I remember in my dad and stepmom's room, they had a 10-inch TV, and we watched Viva Las Vegas, and just the musical numbers, but also the power with him and Anne Margaret and some of those dance numbers. I actually thought that I'd like to be able to sing and dance like that. But prior to that, I didn't have really much of an Elvis sensibility.
Yeah, I feel like I came to Elvis somewhat late. I nerded out on Sister Rosetta from a young age, probably like early teens, and Big Mama Thornton. So the first hound dog I knew was Big Mama Thornton's hound dog. Everyone was like a record collector. It was like very steeped nerddom in Bristol, England. And I grew up in like this little village, very kind of isolated. And so music was the only thing. And we had this Welsh radio station we could get over the estuary, and that was like, would play all the old school stuff.
Yeah.
And so I feel like I would have heard it on Red Dragon FM, lovely. From the Welshies over the way, lovely. And like, welcome to Red Dragon FM. We're gonna play some golden oldies. And it was like all the oldies, and I think that's where I would have like heard Elvis for the first time from the Welsh radio station.
Do y'all remember that cartoon Johnny Bravo?
Yeah. Glasses.
Yeah. And I used to be like, oh, I love Johnny Bravo. My mom was like, baby, he's just trying to be Elvis Presley. And I was like, she was like, so let me put some movies on. So then I started watching some of the Elvis movies, and I was like, oh, okay, Johnny Bravo just trying to be Elvis. Period.
We had a cinema for a while. We did play the Elvis movies. So I remember that, but I suddenly remember something this morning, which was even earlier. I was really young, like 5 or something, and I went to a school. We only had 3 rooms in the school, and it was a Catholic school, and I went to church, and for some reason, as a little kid, I decided to wear pink socks. And the tough guys, I was wearing these pink socks, and the tougher boys in the school at church got me against the wall and like, yeah, mate, why are you wearing those pink socks, you little fairy? Like, we're gonna smash you, right? I'm like, oh my God, the pink socks, bad idea, right? And all of a sudden, I hear this voice. The coolest guy in the school, the older guy, was called Peter Dunn. And they're like, pushing me up against the wall and like, yeah, pink socks. And I hear, hey, what are you doing? And they all turn, it's Peter Dunn, and he's really cool. And he goes, yeah, he's wearing pink socks. And he goes, Elvis wore pink socks. And they all just split.
Wow.
And I went like,
That's wild.
The power of Elvis.
I was like,
even there.
Wow.
That's
Wow,
wild because of
that's great.
Elvis's story of Red West saving him from getting beat up in high school for a
Yeah.
similar thing.
I never thought
And
about
they
that.
became best friends.
It was
for
over
a
hair.
long time.
It was over their hair. They were going to cut
Yeah, they were
Elvis's
gonna
hair,
cut
right?
his hair.
Remember?
They broke his
They
guitar
were going to
strings,
wrestle him to
they
the
cut
ground
his
and
hair.
cut his long hair.
Yeah.
You know, people often talk about what bits you'd love to be in the movies. That's one of the bits I always wanted in there, which the toughest guy, Elvis is like dressing in a way in which just everyone was like, what a squirrel they called him. But that meant a whole lot of other things. And the fact that the tough guys hold him down in the bathroom and they got scissors, they're going to cut his hair. And exactly that happened. Red West goes, hey, what are you doing? And then they become lifelong friends.
Did Red West say, hey, he's going to be Elvis?
Yeah.
He was my destiny.
I did not have the appreciation of Elvis that he warranted, outside of sort of like a historian museum piece thing. Prior to meeting Baz, I had read the Goralnik 2-volume biography. The first one is Last Train from Memphis, and somebody helped me with the name of the second volume. I can't remember what.
Mystery Train?
Yeah, Mystery Train. And the first one is going up into the Army, and then everything is coming back from the Army. What I did not have an appreciation for was what the '68 comeback special meant to the artistry of Elvis Presley, up through, let's say, the first 2 years at the Hilton, right?
Yeah.
Years 3, 4, and 5. That might have been when he was caught in a trap. But and I have to say, I had a knowledge of what we were going through when we were making the movie.
Yeah.
And I'd done enough research and anecdotal stuff and talking to Austin about what the '68 comeback special was going to be. And I always thought it's called the comeback special. I grew up, Elvis didn't have to come back from anything, as I thought. He was a Hershey bar. He was as American as, Coca-Cola. But that comeback special, and then seeing all the work that we've done, and also now seeing what you three people did with the movie from the comeback special through Las Vegas, I didn't realize that was the third incarnation of a great American artist who, great artists do these things where they define themselves. At the same time, they define the era that they are in. And I think you can take that premiere of Las Vegas Hilton Elvis Presley and just say, that was the apex of a time, and it came about all because of the artistry of a single man. So from this movie, I think I have a grander, almost layman historian perspective of Elvis was much more important. He was as important as Charlie Chaplin was to the zeitgeist, and a handful of other people in the course of 100 years. That's what I got from it.
Yeah. That really kind of, that artistic angle was something that really kind of just sang to me. Fighting for your right to be artistic in the way that you see fit is the arc that we follow, and that's the arc that all of the musicians that you love fight for every single day. When I first spoke to Baz and he goes, we're dealing with this thing of the cell overtaking the art form. That is something that we fight as artists every day. What people are always trying to go, oh yeah, this is what I want you to be, or this is my lens. And your lens is the most important thing. So when this movie just really got me to feeling that we had a lot of shared experience. He has a lot of shared experience with artists over the decades for the fight to kind of be authentic to their story, to their life experience, and that's a tough life experience to navigate astride, the line of segregation. Trying to tell that story truthfully as it appears to you is tough.
Yeah, I think watching an artist define and then redefine himself as well with the changing cultural context as well as a developing man too is always a really fascinating thing to see fleshed out, particularly because, he had such a lens that was magnified on him, the defining and redefining of man. It's fascinating.
I think more than anything, from spending time here in Memphis and a lot of time, and from finding Sam Bell and understanding his early experience, his love of gospel, rock and roll, blues, but gospel. I mean, till the day he passed, I mean, after 2 shows, he would stay up with the Sweet Inspirations, and they would sing, one of whom's mother happened to have a daughter called Whitney Houston. He would sing with them gospel till the sun came up. Now, what that told me about him that I didn't understand was that he was a deeply spiritual person. You can argue all sorts of things, you know, flawed, incredible, brilliant, sensitive, all those things, but spiritual. And spiritual to me means a gargantuan inner life. So he wasn't a very verbal person. He didn't say like make speeches, but when he sang, that gargantuan inner life came out and affected human beings. It lifted the spirit. Yeah. So he was a spiritual person. That was the thing that I didn't expect to come and encounter.
That's what struck me as well, the sensitivity of him, that deep vulnerability and spirituality that he had inside. You look at any icon and there's that misconception that they just kind of came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
You know, and so putting his life in context and seeing, I mean, that's why I'm just so grateful that I get to be a part of a film that finally puts his life in context and gives credit where credit is due. I had to get past so many misconceptions around him to really try to just find who he was in a quiet room, you know?
I wish to promote you, Mr. Presley. Are you ready to fly?
I'm ready. Ready to fly.
Tomorrow, all of America will be talking about Elvis Presley.
Presley, try not to move around so much during the takes.
I can't move, I can't sing. The first thing that came to my mind is, I don't know if we've ever said this while we're in the same room together, but Tom did this very kind thing that I'd sort of heard myths about, which is he sent me a typewriter when he first got to Australia. But it wasn't just the typewriter, it was a beautiful typewriter, and I couldn't believe that. It was kind of one of those things where I just thought, this
It's worth over $50.
Yeah, well, this beautiful chrome typewriter. But with it came this letter from Colonel Tom Parker that this man had written. And it was so invaluable to me because I was seeing the mind of this man. And so I typed one back as Elvis.
Yeah, yes.
And I sent it back. And so we sent letters back and forth. And it was an amazing way to rehearse because I was having to put on paper the mind of a man. It takes it from being this esoteric thing and you're crystallizing it in some way. And it felt like a lot of pressure with every word that I typed, you know?
Yeah, me too.
Because I thought, is this what Elvis really feels? And it was kind of a beautiful way that we got to rehearse while being in separate rooms.
Separated by the biohazard security team of the state of Queensland. Those were based on letters that I saw that did go back and forth. And they are letters that are loaded with a common language, affection for each other. Well, my boy, you've done it again. Once, you know, it's all that. I can't help but stand back in awe of all the choices you make. And I want to let you know that Mr. So-and-so of Paramount Pictures has, there's just so much stuff that is not the dictatorial trope that you would think would become between a manager who's just trying to maximize and take advantage of it. There was bona fide, true affection and, dare we say it, love that was communicated between these two guys for a while.
I mean, all of us, I think, us getting to spend so much time together prior to filming.
It was such a little family.
I mean,
it allowed for that family feeling.
It's probably worth reminding ourselves that we do plays, and these are players. That's what actors are called in the old days. And you can't play for a living if you're fearful. So the number one thing I like to do is create an environment where fear is left outside. And in the circle that we're living and creating in, there's not fear, there's room to play. Now, we thought we would go out to Australia and play for 3 months. None of us saw that I would go out, and I did not leave Queensland, forget Australia. I didn't leave there for 2 years. And there was the shutdown, and the film was maybe going to go away and all of that. And then when finally, I'm talking to Tom, and it gave us time to recalibrate and dig in deeper. And finally, we were making the film, and then I think about moments where, Alton and Kelvin and Yola and they're having to do 2 weeks quarantine to get into Queensland in a sort of small box, with like a sandwich in a cardboard box coming in.
Yeah.
And I'm going like, how's it going? You okay?
Steak
And they're
with
going
no
like,
cutlery.
yeah, fine, can do it. And I think of all of that. But when we finally got back and were making the movie, after the initial just, obstacle and maybe it's not going to happen. The privilege of actually being able to make a movie and be together And I think just the collective feeling, like, I mean, Tom would, I saw you guys never leaving the set, hanging around talking. Austin went to perform on the first day in the leather with such fear and trepidation. But I remember Tom coming to say, I'm just coming to see this, you know? And like, we just were in a special place at a special time. I think telling a special story, a story that when we now find we are where we are, is worth putting out there because it's got something to say to the world we're in right now.
I missed all the stuff that you guys did in Memphis. I wasn't around for that. And that struck me as, if I had been down there, it says, I got a day off, but I think I'm going to go watch the shooting.
I used to do that. I would
Yeah.
have days off and I would just come to set and like watch Beale Street or like watch performances. I remember I watched your guys' scene.
Yeah, I
It was
remember
so much
watching,
fun.
Gary Clark Jr.
Yes, me too. And Shankar. I stuck around with Shankar because she was just like...
I sat all day
She was
and I was like, I
crazy
am
good.
not mad at this.
couldn't
And like
believe
Baz is walking around, so he's not using this seat and like
With your microphone.
oh, I know. Oh, I've been inspired.
I think it's also because every performance and each artist was so different. Everyone brought
And they all had a
something.
moment too.
Yeah.
They had a
Everyone
rich,
had a
And
beautiful
so
moment.
powerful and magical in their own little way. So it made you want to like see what they're doing and what their style
Yeah,
is.
well, it translates to the screen because, like, in Cannes, I've been to Cannes when I was like 29. I've opened it twice. I'm in Cannes, and when Little Richard comes on and does they applaud.
They applaud.
It doesn't happen.
The first applaud.
They broke
That was
into
crazy.
spontaneous applause like they were in that club handy, and that
was
came from the energy that was alive in every set. It wasn't just in
radiating off the
set.
screen.
It was in the making of a movie.
For real, that scene. Just like all the extras
wild.
and like
The extras on
they
this
were
film
turned
were
out.
That's
just
what made it feel good.
Beautiful.
at all
It
of the
was
performances.
electrifying.
Yeah,
like,
they
electrifying.
they threw
It
themselves
felt
into
like
it.
real Beale Street people. We would be behind the scenes right before a scene was set talking. And there would be like these guys talking to us, and we'd be. Remember, he gave us a book. Like there was a writer there.
yeah.
There was a children's book.
He did a TED talk.
He
did a TED
He did a
talk.
TED
He
talk.
did a
He
TED
did a TED
talk.
talk.
Like it felt like I was like, okay, well we're in Beale Street now.
Yeah.
So
A lot of
we're
TED
immersed.
Talks.
That's the stuff that gets short shrift in the usual treatment of the Elvis, rags to riches story. They might pay a little bit, the postage stamp version of it all. But you invested a ton of time there in Club Handy. I mean, there's a major part, and I think
was
the
a
audience
sanctuary.
said thank you, so that we get to have that grander understanding of what Elvis says in the '68 comeback special. He's sitting there in Atlantic City. He says, "Look, rock and roll is essentially it's like gospel and rhythm and blues," and we saw where it came from inside you. It was great.
Some people wanted to put me in jail, so I was moving.
They might put me in jail for walking across the street, but you're a famous white boy.
The way he sings is God-given, so there can't be nothing wrong with it.
Senator Kennedy has been shot. Martin Luther King has been shot to death in Memphis.
That's all right for you. Tragedy, but it has nothing to do with us.
It has everything to do with us.
I feel like the music overlay reflected like the past, the present, and the future. You know, you get Doja Cat, you hear some rap, you hear some trap, and then you go all the way to the 1950s with B.B. King and Little Richard and Rosetta Tharpe. That made it new, but also paid homage to where it all originated from, and that felt good to me. It felt good, yeah.
Like I was quite surprised about the setup of like the soundtrack coming so early in the process. And I was like, you've got to be a die-hard music lover. You've got to be so about music to see everything through this art and then into just the scene. So when I'm tracking, like, we're doing this alternate strange things. Strange things, there are strange things I'm happening every day. And you're supposed to be like he's talking through this scene. I'm like, I feel like I can see it. What's this mind palace that I'm in? So I go into the booth and then Baz will be giving me, this is the energy moment. And this is the chill, oh yes. Oh, and so I was really getting, it was like an introduction to being directed before even being on set or having the part. It felt like psychologically that I was really in it. And that this is something that grounds itself in love of music. And I think that's Like, that's always going to appeal to an artist, to a recording artist. We're always going to love that.
Yeah. I was there that day that you were recording.
You were? That's when we met.
I was in the sound booth, and I was watching Yola and Baz. Watching you two together, I really afterwards, I said, you know, I've seen genius at work. Seeing you two together, it was like this supernova. It was just unbelievable to witness.
I remember the first time that I heard any music was actually before I met you, and I was sitting on the couch in that cabana office space that you had, and you were like, oh, sometimes that's better. Let me play you a little something. And I was like, okay. And so I sat down on the couch, and I was so many years ago now, and I sat there, put my little bag down, and you played this track, and I just remember I melted into the couch and just started crying, tears. And I remember I came out and I met you, and I was like, oh my God, like I was so moved. And this was like way before we even had that break too. And it was just like, you could feel it. I remember that moment, you know, all the walls, like Baz has this very immersive space. All the walls were plastered with like pictures of Elvis's whole life, of Priscilla, of all you guys. And it was just this moment where I was like, oh my God, like we're making something special. And the backbone of it is such a deep love and respect for his legacy, his music, and his life. And it was very exciting.
Us going to the gospel
I was going to say, got to mention about going to the churches, because we were doing it, remember that? We go down to churches in Nashville. That scene in the gospel tent where Elvis and all the little kids are there, like that sound is recorded in churches with gospel singers.
And I mean, that was such a gift for me. Because people will ask about ways in, and for me, as far as his physicality goes, it was never about the external. It was never about that for him. It was always about the music moving him. People will ask, how do you find that? And that was a pivotal moment for me, because being in that gospel church, in the midst of that song that we then hear in the film, but it wasn't just a song. There was a moment where Shannon said, you know, I've got something to moan about. I've got something my soul needs to sing today, and I know you all have something to moan about. And so everybody just started wailing. And we're wailing and wailing and stomping feet. And I was standing in the middle of it, just chills down my body, tears down my face, and stomping my feet. And that was the moment where I felt my soul stirring into the place where then I knew anytime I didn't feel that I was off. So I was always about tapping back into that feeling.
Yes.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
You know, I talk about keeping fear away. I feel like the music is this magic ring around the whole cast and the whole set. You know what, speaking of Beale Street, there was a scene where Elvis is driving back and he's angry, he's looking for BB.
Yes.
And like, we got hundreds of extras, and we built the whole of Beale Street. We were there the other night. And like, it's kind of not clicking. Like, everyone's a bit like nervous, you know. The actors on the set. And
2 in the morning.
You know, 2 in the morning at night. And I'm like, there's fear here. There's fear here in the space. And I said to the guy, you got Kanye West Black Skinhead? Turn it up. And we turn it up, and it's playing immediately. Everyone, and Austin's getting out, and everyone's like, hey, Elvis.
Ripping this Cadillac around the corner.
And driving the Cadillac. And you can see Austin going like, I'm trying to get to my friend BB, but I'm dealing with fans. And it was so real that I didn't have to, I just let the cameras roll. And what you see in a movie is the 5 cameras just rolling. Because the music put a ring around everyone of going like, this is Saturday night on Beale. It feels like Black Skinhead by Kanye West.
I was like, I didn't know how much I grew up on movies, because I was like, I feel like I'm in a movie, now I can actually act. Because otherwise it was like, well, this is stale. And I was like, you put that on, I was like, all right, Elvis, AP, come on.
That was beautiful.
There's no rules on a Baz Lurhmann movie. No rules.
Reverend once told me, when things are too dangerous to say, sing. I'm gonna be 40 soon, and nobody's gonna remember me. I need to get back to who I really am. And who are you, Oz? I just gotta be making the most of this thing while I can. This can all be over in a flash.
I I worked a lot on the voice. I think, you know, I read her book 100 times over. But I think at the core of it, you know, and we spoke a lot about this too, it was just really important to play her and to play them, I think, as, you know, just a boy and a girl who are in love. And that's all that it is, you know, just two kids in love, two kids against the world. So that was it for me.
Started with the interviews, and then I started going through all the music, and then I found this like incredible guitar tutorial that he did, where he was explaining like how he improvises. And I was like, I always, you know, my dad's a musician, so I was like, you know, my dad talks like he plays. And so I was like, oh, BB definitely talks like he improvises. And so I was like, watching him explain, oh, why he bends a note, or why he'll like change the rhythm or whatever it is, or why he might like add more vibrato on a certain note. And he was like, it sounded tender, or he'd be like, it's more passionate or definitive. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm gonna take that and I'm just gonna put it to the scene work. And I was like, and that's how I find my end to make BB feel like the spirit of him is in this scene that's in the make-believe world, you know, and to an extent. But I was like, I'm gonna use the music to give him his voice.
I got to do some digging back in my own background. I got to go back to Louisiana, Shreveport, Louisiana. And I really just aligned with some of those essences. It's kind of like how you were speaking about the church and like the soul. So I spent a lot of time back in the soul in my dad's hometown and did a lot of digging into our ancestry. You know, being a descendant of Mahalia Jackson, I got to tap in to that energy. And then considering my character and like what he was experiencing at that time with being so introverted but extroverted, growing up in a house of 12 kids, so having to authenticate every single detail about himself, from his makeup to his hair to his suit, and then segregation and religion and sexuality being up in the air. I kind of just like tapped into that and what that push and pull might feel like, you know, what that frustration might be, and then bringing that to the stage like he would. But it was fun because I was playing a young, electrifying Little Richard. I wasn't like having like a downtime. I got to be on fire, you know, within it, so.
Reading about her, I'd read a lot about her growing up, and Sister Rosetta thought she had like a quietness to her and a boldness to her, because you have to be bold to be that out and queer in the 40s. Who feels safe doing that? Like, and coming from a religious background, like you've got to have the stones of all stones to be just that bombastic. But there was a quietness to her that I found interesting. So like sometimes Baz would be like, you're holding court. I'm like, yes, but I'm extra. So I can't be holding court like how I would hold court. I've got to do a quieter version of holding court. There's still grace to it. I'm a bit of a klutz. She wasn't. And like, so I've really got to kind of get to the other side. I've got to somehow transport myself to this quiet confidence, this person that can just emanate this sense of comfort enough. Artists like Little Richard, who she discovers, you know, as a young kid, have the space to feel that they can let all of that conflict explode out and into everything that we saw and idolized, you know? Like there needs to be space to do that. If you're in the South at that time and you're queer, or you feel like you might be, like you're not gonna feel free. But that night, and like her space was a space that artists like that felt free to be really expressive. I think being the elder, that was my role, was to just emanate some of that. And also try and get it up on screen a bit, because I wanted to like put a little bit of that story into it. So I'd turn around to the piano player, I'd be like, oh, hi, how you doing, girl? Hi. Just to, we'd play flirt sometimes, just to like make sure that at some point, like when I looked at her, I didn't look at her too platonically. And so, yeah, a bit of play flirting, and yeah, just imagining what it would take to create that a progressive space in an era that no one thinks would be that progressive.
You ain't nothing but a dog player, I get it.
I wish to promote you, Mr. Presley. Tomorrow, all of America will be talking about my war.
Who the hell is that?
Crying all the time. Elvis Presley. You ain't nothing but
You don't do the business will do you.
I'm gonna do what I want to do. Sing the music that I want.
a dog player,
being amongst, I'm going to say 200 extras. We've recreated opening night at the Las Vegas International Hilton. We're sitting in those glorious booths, and I've got my 5 hours of preparation on. I'm all there, and everybody's sort of looking around for the other guy in the movie, and it turns out to be they're waiting for him, and they're looking for me, and I'm the bald fat guy sitting in the back. But there was because we were never together, because the COVID protocols kept us separate. We didn't get to hang with each other on this, and that's one of the reasons we make movies in the first place, because it's a good hang. Austin would be off being turned into Elvis. I was being turned into the Colonel, and I would get to the set, and we were sort of just like waiting for you. But the electricity of what we were shooting that day, and the opulence of the set, and the fact that everybody, when you're a background extra in a movie, you wake up in your apartment at 4:45 in the morning and drive and park in the farthest parking lot away from the sound stage as possible, and you kind of walk in, and then you get processed kind of like a cog in a machine. But you then get marched over. The women are marched over in their perfectly coiffed hair, their perfectly accented clothes, their high heels, and we're in this very, very glamorous simulacra, if I'm using the right word, of the Las Vegas Hilton. Yeah. And we are waiting for Elvis to start the show. When it finally occurred, and I think we all felt, there he is. The curtain came up, and there was the music blaring like crazy, and there was an element of, there it is. And we did it many times that day. But every time that curtain came up, we all felt the same way. Yeah. There he is. We could not take our eyes off it. And we essentially got to see an Elvis show over and over again for all that night, and not once did it flag, and not once was it not something that you could not take your eyes off it. That's one of the most exciting days I've had in a movie in a long time. And nothing was really expected of me. I just had to, sit there and say a few words eventually. But mostly I was just there watching the rock and roll show of my boy, and it was stellar.
My experience is exactly the same one, and I'll add to this. So we do it, boom, curtain. It's so real. And we did a lot more than's in the film because we had to serve the story. I have crew that have worked with me for 30 years. And there's one guy called Brett, and he's kind of like, and he pushes, he pushes the camera around. And he's a man of few words. And he goes, and he might have said like a dozen words to me in 30 years, but we're really connected. When you're a tight crew around a camera, they're like your A-team, And Oz comes in, the curtain goes up, he performs right all the way through, cameras rolling, everything. And I mean, like you say about the extras, they've got 5 a.m. They were not pretending to react. No. They were reacting, and during each number, Oz would be Elvis and do gags like that. Anyway, we finally called cut, and Brett comes over and he goes, boss, I've worked on your Star Wars, and I've done your Supermans and the Thin Red Lines, man. I mean, what's going on here? I've never seen anything like this. He said, I'd pay money to be here. Yes! Right? And I think I thought those extras would pay money to be there. They had the golden Willy Wonka ticket.
You were down on the other end of the stage.
I was up on the thing. I was sitting next to Luke Bracey, and we watched on in disbelief as you came out in the leather jacket, and he got the walk down, and it was the first time that I'd seen it. But I also did want to say I will also never ever forget watching Shankar.
Yeah.
Yes. Because you're incredible, but Shankar, I've seen your stuff as well so much. I had the honor of being able to sit and watch so many performances. But Shankar, I mean, that was a spiritual experience too. I think to watch, a star essentially be born, to have something in her sort of break free, it was just. It was insane to watch.
Context important.
Yes.
We go down to record gospel singers in Nashville, and we're in that church scene we're talking about, and one of them is the one, leader of the gang, and she goes, wah, wah, wah. And Elliot Wheeler says, look, Big Mama Thornton, should she play Big Mama Thornton? She says, oh, I'd love that, blessings. Comes out to Australia, does the quarantine. And, she did that number over and over again.
Perfect, every single time.
Every time.
They're not
so soulful.
And seductive. And
yes.
Yeah. Owning it, owning it. And then I said, look, when we start to translate the language by having Doja Cat do a layover to, I said, how'd you feel about we do the song and we have Doja do a rap over it so that the language in the Hound Dog, which is pretty saucy language, which you don't get it, she goes, oh, blessings. And then one day I ring her and I say, hey, how would you feel about being in Coachella and coming out of a giant silver robot with Doja? And she's like, just so many blessings, you know?
So many blessings. For real.
She's the most divine person.
She looked bad. She looked like a baddie.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, she did. She did.
Watching her transform is
amazing.
So effortless.
Because she's
so
so
soft
spoken.
Quite an introvert.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And
just
it's that softly
sweet.
spoken person that's so gentle.
Yeah.
And like everyone in Nashville was like, oh, we've always wanted this for Shonka because she's so talented, but she's so gentle.
Do you remember when we got off the plane? We were all on the same plane when we got
Yes.
to the Gold Coast.
Yes.
And it was me, you, were you on our flight?
I wasn't on your flight.
Shonka was there though.
Shonka
like,
was.
I can't believe that I'm about to be in a movie. She's like, my grandma gonna be like, Shonka, you did it, girl. And then she gets on set and I was like, what's she about to do? She went, whoa!
That was waiting in her for years and years and years. It was an animal.
I knew big expectations, but boom, the roof went off. And about over and over again, because we had to do it over again for different reasons, you know? Every single time, you know? Owned it.
You have been watching Entertainment Weekly's Around the Table with Elvis. Look for our film that is opening, Elvis, directed by Baz Lurhmann, on June 24th.